So what we're looking at here is a hood off of a 2014 BMW. I believe it's a 428i. It's a little sport coupe with a turbo engine. This is the hood, obviously. And what we found was there was all this looked like blistering, almost like the paint was boiling off the hood. So we first thought, well, stone chips and little spots of rust. And as time started going on, you could see like all this blistering. I should have took a before video or picture. But the funny thing is when you really looked at some of it, it looked like it hadn't been chipped anywhere. So you had like, instead of like a bubble or a couple bubbles, or the typical bubble with the little X in it and the kind of, it was all like lines and spots, and it was all trapped underneath, and it was in like clusters. It looked like, imagine painting over like a raspberry. So there was probably 100+ spots like that all over the hood. So what we did is we took the roll-lock with some 36, opened up all those spots, turned the air way down so the roll-lock barely spins, just takes the paint off so you can see what's underneath. And I believe what we realized, it was a second paint job on this hood, and I believe what happened is this car probably had a lot of miles on a road where it was getting a lot of stone chips, whether that be gravel laid down in the winter with the salt, or maybe the guy had a cottage on a back road and he went there every weekend for 4 years. We don't know. This was a car that was bought used. I think my buddy bought this and it was like a 2-year-old, 3-year-old car. But anyway, and it had the telltale signs of a second paint job where you had like the odd little dust nib and stuff, which something tells me BMW wouldn't do that. But maybe they do. I can go to a lot of car lots and you give me a rag and a little bit of Windex and I can walk around on a car lot and find you things that you'd be shocked about on brand new cars. Anyways, this thing had dust nibs. Pretty sure it was repainted, sanded through it. It seemed like a repaint. Now, it seemed like they sanded a lot of the old stuff down, and I think what they did is they probably sanded the clear down to the base coat, and then whatever spots were there. They probably then threw some primer on it and then repainted the hood. Could be the car, but we know for the hood. That's all we're working on today. So it was like spot. This hood was covered in them. So what I did is I used the CRE 321 high build epoxy. Actually, let's back up a bit. We found all the spots. We ground them out as far as we could. In some of the spots, because it had been basically boiling under the hood, there was little black marks in the middle once you'd clean it, like little dots. Now, if you leave that untreated, eventually those tend to become pinholes. Now, if this was a Cavalier, Cobalt, Focus, I'd call the wrecker. I'd say, send me a hood in really decent condition. We'd repaint the hood and replace it. This was a BMW. I couldn't get one right away. We could have bought one new. I figured, well, let's try something a little different to see if it works. So we cleaned it all off. We had our 150 little spots all over that we ground open through the paint. We basically took some 80 grit on the DA, sanded probably most of the clear coat off the car, or off the hood, I should say. What we did then is we went into those little spots because there was kind of staining and whatnot. Now, most of them ground off real nice. But just to be safe, we actually gave the hood a vinegar bath for about 40 minutes. Half vinegar, half water. Took a wire brush, you scrub it in, lifts everything off. Coat the whole hood in basically a sheet. We soaked it with half and half vinegar and water, like after the quick scrub. We let that sit for, well, the total was about 40-45 minutes. So we probably scrubbed for about 5 minutes, put the cloths on, soaked it. After it sat for about half an hour, we came back and then, just basically took a cleaning brush and you scrub it all in. Leaves a little brown stuff. You see all this brown stuff come out of the metal, and it could just be the reaction in the vinegar. It isn't rust. People go, oh, if it dries on, it leaves a coating of rust. It's not rust. It's something the vinegar does with the corrosion. But when you wash it and clean it after the fact, you got to use, now what we did is we tried the baking soda thing where you just keep putting baking soda in the warm water. You mix it up, get it nice and cloudy looking, and the idea is you keep it wet with some of that and scrub it again. That'll neutralize the acid from the vinegar, because you don't want this to continue to eat. So we did that. We cleaned it really, really well. Beyond that, we went soap and water, cleaned it really well, really, really fast. Cleaned it all off, blew it off, the whole chamois thing, get it as dry as you can. And then basically I washed it off with a little bit of thinner, gun wash thinner, something strong. Clean it off, that'll dry it out, it'll evaporate, everything's gone. And what that left us was 99% of the spots. You can see here where I sanded through, and that's just clean metal underneath. We'll hit that with a bit of primer after. 99% of them looked like this, but there were 4 spots, I believe, here and here and down in this area. There was little black marks that were deeper, like pitting. So we took a needle to see how hard those were. You couldn't go through. They were rock hard. Now they turn right black once the vinegar sat on them for a while, and it kind of exposes them. So out of our, I'm going to guess 120, 130 little spots that were ground, 4 of them had those spots in them. And I mean, they were really, really minor. Again, I should have done a video. But this came in on a long weekend, and I've been working on it on and off throughout the long weekend, which kind of sucks, but it's a friend's car, and you know, we had to do something with it because it's a beautiful car and the hood just looks shitty, right? So then what I did is I mixed up a batch of Cree 321, which is a epoxy primer that can be sanded. Now, we put it on, and I put it on fat. It looked like a roller paint job as it was all lumpy and bumpy and kind of disgusting. So what I did is I first coated the whole hood, 1.8 nozzle in a primer gun, and I ran slow and I let it kind of, you know, wave up a bit, like I put it on really, really fat. Then I went around where you could see all the little sinkholes from all those spots. I waited about 15-20 minutes, and I turned the gun way down and spot shot all those spots about 3-4 times, kind of to pool it and fill it. And then, I mean, some of it sinks out again, but it is what it is. And then the last coat, which was another full coat, went super fat and wet, and I basically used, let me show you the gun. Carworks, I think, sends these Optimum 350s, 1.8 tip. That was pretty much full to almost the cap there, maybe a 3/4 an inch, maybe an inch down from the top. All of that ended up on this hood. Then what I did is I took 80 on a DA, and I crisscross blocked the whole hood with a DA because we were going to block it all out by hand. Now what I did do is I went up these edges by hand using the Durablocks. Same there. Some of the ones that were deep and really bumpy, hit that with 80 and blocked it out flat. But this stuff does sand well. It's a big hood, and you don't want to be doing this for 3 days. So I crisscrossed it with the DA with 80. Crisscross blocked it again with the DA, and it's like a short throw DA. So like, I mean, they're pretty smooth. You can't stop. You have to always be moving. You go a little bit circular, but you go one way and then you go the other way and back and forth. Like, you play around with it, but you basically want it all on one plane. So when you see a deep spot, you can't just sand it down until you hit it, because what happens is you'll see a darker color of primer, and but I've got it all sanded down, so that's long gone. That's just the old base coat underneath a little bit. If you look here, you can't feel that. You can barely see it, but you can see it on camera. There's a little bit of whatever paint was on the car, and this is where we had some stuff we ground off. It filled that up. This is like a sheet of glass. When I prime over that, that's gone. Everything you see is gone. There's another one here where you can see there was a bad one here. And again, when I say bad one, when you grind, it takes all the junk off, takes the rust off. You're going to lose a little bit of steel. Now, if you see black spots, you can't keep grinding in because your metal will be so thin it'll be useless, right? That'll be garbage. But here you can see that's not body filler, that's epoxy primer. I can see it, I can look at it. You can even see where the epoxy filled swirls in places, but you can't touch it. That's not going to show through. That's smooth, smooth, smooth. So we ran the 80, 180, 220, 320, 400. Now, by the time you get to the 320, it doesn't take you half an hour to go over the hood. It takes you, like, with the 320, maybe 10 minutes. And then with the 400, like 4 or 5 minutes. And you can actually kind of see if you catch the light, you come down and catch the light, you can see how it almost, say, the sheen changes. It's almost like you're polishing it out with the 400. So 400, and it depends on what you're using. People go, oh, go to 6, go to 8, and all this. Look at your TDS sheet for whatever you're using. I'm using Matrix. It's pretty high quality stuff. Base coat, clear coat we're going to use. And when you use the Matrix, I find it says 4 to 500 on a machine 400, because 400 on the machine I think is like 600 by hand. But whatever, 400 machine with Matrix, I've done a lot of them, especially in the dark colors. It's going to hide most of it. I don't think you'd see any issues. So what we do have to do now, there's a handful of spots. My only gripe about some of the primers, right there, see that little dot? There's one there, and then there's one there. There's one somewhere else down the side here. But basically there's about 5-6 little spots like that where in the primer, the stuff on the side of the can falls in sometimes. I didn't strain the primer when I put it in the gun. So then I dumped it out, strained it, put it back in. But there was a couple like globs. Now the globs will turn hard and melt right in for the most part. But you will get the odd one when you sand it, it'll look soft, and it just does this. It makes a couple holes. So I'm going to go around with a teeny tiny bit of finishing putty, fill those holes, scuff them off with the 400. And then this will get we'll just throw a coat of probably just a cheap and cheesy primer at that point, just to give it like a sealer, you know, whatever you want to use as a sealer. You can use this stuff as a sealer. You definitely want to thin it down so that it goes on thin and flat. But, you know, and then you can use, I mean, pretty much anything. I think I have some, what do we got over here? I've got this kicking around, this pure reflection stuff with the hardener. It's not expensive. Like, this is your CRE 321 stuff, and it's an epoxy sandable, and it builds real fat and high. See what I mean? Like this stuff here, it's not really dry. It's kind of goopy, right? So you have some inside, falls in when you're mixing it. That's what creates those little holes. But we'll touch that up, and I'll just grab some of this, mix it a little bit wet, put a thin coat on there. And again, it's just enough that the paint will have something to stick to over the filler that we're going to put in those few little holes. Now the other thing you could do with this, I don't think it's necessary, but let's say you made a mistake and you didn't strain it at all and you had a lot of that going on, pinholes and whatnot. Mix this down a little bit, or don't mix it actually. Well, don't thin it, mix it, do what you're supposed to do. Put another coat on, it'd probably hide all that and fix all that too. But in this case, we're talking 5 or 6 little spots. I'm just going to touch those up with a little bit of, gosh, I mean, what'll I use? Probably metal glaze, because I think I have some kicking around over here. I'm going to probably use this just because I have it. I don't use it as much anymore. For large areas, I use this now. And as I come to the end of a build, I start using this. This stuff, if you use this, it sands nice. It's beautiful stuff. It is a little slower to kick. Both of these products, a little slower to kick than, say, your Evercoat cheapy white stuff. This stuff isn't better than this stuff. This stuff is shockingly good. You know what, I might even just use that stuff because I've been using it so much that I'm used to it. So I'll do that, fill the spots, put a bit of primer over those spots. Now when you do use something as a sealer, just make sure you're using something that's okay on metal, because here you can see where those got filled. Here's a little metal that showed through. So this is all kind of blocked, so everything is smooth, right? I mean, that's primer, it's not filler. You don't have to prime that at all. You can paint right over that. But I mean, if you throw a little bit of primer, just like a super fine coat just to color it, it'll just make your paint go down easier. You're not trying to add coats and stuff. And the thing is with these paints that have a lot of gosh, like when you look at the metallic in this black paint, now there's not enough of it, but there's enough of it to change the color from black to like a charcoaly black. And when you look real close, it's not like a Chrysler where you see, you know, or GM or whatever, where you see, oh, there's a little bit of metallic in the black paint. It's like a multicolored metallic. It's probably a little bit pearly, so not a tri-coat, but probably just a base coat with some cool stuff in it to give it a little bit of pearlescent. So we're going to want to do kind of a wet, quick, just basically get some paint on there to make it color. We're not even going to try to do we're not going to try to hide or coat anything on my first coat. I'm going to shoot some on, let it kick off, do a full medium coat, turn the gun up just a touch. That's what I like to do with the Matrix with these dark colors. And then my second full wet coat it's going to look bang on. Then I crank the gun way up, fan wide open, I come up a little higher. You can just kind of sweep across the whole thing, and that should orient your metallic. Now that being said, this is a dark enough color. If you're trying to do something and you're a little worried, but we're talking blacks, super dark blues, and with the lighter colors that are bright, orientation coat and all this could matter. Use a better product. The better products tend to be a little more forgiving. But with the Matrix, if I primed all those dark spots and made it all one, I could probably do like 2 coats. And sometimes you look at it and it's like you can almost see if it needs another one. It's like a little more metallic would look more like what's on the vehicle. And what I might do is I'll probably pull this car outside just for a little while, and I'll pull the BMW in here because it's in my other garage and it's nice and clean. Because I'll do my full 2 wet coats. You can kind of look at it with good lighting, take a mental picture, walk out, look at the car, and it'll kind of tell you if you need a little more or a little less. Now another coat with the Matrix I find will do it, and then you don't have to worry with that trying to get your metallic to blend orientation, right? This ain't silver, again, dark color. That's what works for me. But yeah, so basically we wanted to save this hood because if this was like I guess there's the 3 something, 4 something, 6 something, there's all these different levels of BMW, but I couldn't get the hood for the 2-door for this car right away. We need this car on the road, so this is what we did. And again, I don't know if this is going to work 100%. It should, but that's not to say something won't rust somewhere and get, say, 2-3 bubbles. If that happens in a couple years' time, we're going to just fix those few little bubbles and blend them in, because I think this is going to work. It's a bit of an experiment. And again, you know, we're throwing a bunch of product at this car. This stuff's not cheap. Your paint, everything else, but it might save you from, I don't even know what this hood would cost. From a wrecker, let alone new. I wonder if new, it might have been cheap. But anyway, I figured, you know what, let's try this. I have the products here. I use them all the time. I think this is going to work. It is a nice car, but at the end of the day, it's something that's driven year-round. Winter, everything else. So the epoxy primer should seal it up, should starve it from oxygen. It shouldn't corrode underneath. It's been treated. It's been cleaned. All the good stuff. I did forget to mention earlier where the little black spots were that I mentioned that I couldn't quite get out, which is kind of like staining where I believe it would probably start to pit later, maybe become pinhole. I did use a rust converter acid that I have, and I just touched those 4 or 5 spots a few times, let it burn a bit, and then washed it out again. It should be neutralized. And if you starve it for air, it can't breathe. If it can't breathe and it can't get humidity, it can't rust. This should work. Again, that ain't body filler. That's just primer inside what we ground out. So nothing that didn't already let go is, you know what I mean? I'm pretty sure everything that was bad the first time they tried to fix it showed its ugly head. And if it didn't, we could get spots in other places. Now, this was happening about a year ago. And I said, you know, go through another winter and we'll do it next year. And I thought, well, if there's 4 or 5 places, let's see how many places there really is. So we had a sneaking suspicion, just the way it was to look at. Here's that other spot I forgot about. But sometimes, you know, oh, I got 2, 3 little bubbles, fix them right away, fix them right away. If you know the vehicle, you know the vehicle's good, it's never been repainted, fine. Sneaking suspicion this was repainted. I mean, we were pretty sure it was repainted. So we figured if we wait a little bit, see if they all come out. One winter, every single one came out. Now, it doesn't mean there wasn't a couple that didn't come out, but, you know, at this point, we're talking of the guy's owned the car now since 2016, 17, and it's a 14 car. So 6 years later, I mean, I think what was going to give up the goat did. That's the hope. But anyway, if I remember a year from now, because this car's at my place quite often, we'll do a walk around or something like that, and just to show you how it worked or not. Can't hurt to try it. Cheers.